Thank you, Sharon. My first guest tonight is Human Services Minister Alan Tudge, who's already in Canberra, ready for the week. Welcome to the program.
G'day, Patricia.
So there are nearly 700,000 pensioners who will effectively have to wait until close to Christmas to find out if they face cuts to their pensions because of these new asset tests on their investments. Why are you taking so long to inform them? It means they can't plan or have no certainty.
Patricia, these were decisions which were made by the Parliament over 12 months ago. They were announced from memory about 18 months ago, and they've been aired extensively in the nation's newspapers, including the new thresholds, the assets tests and the like. So it won't come as a surprise to most people that there's going to be some changes come the 1st of January. What Centrelink is doing, though, right now is sending out a letter to people who might be affected and just informing them with a bit of detail as to what the new thresholds are, pointing them to the new calculator, which is on the website, should they want to go and have a look at that, or indeed encouraging them to go into one of the Centrelink centres to find out further details.
Sure, but in terms of specifics, they literally have to wait on the cusp of Christmas to find out how individually they'll be affected.
They always have to wait until the last minute in any case, because the pension has a number of tests which include an income test as well as assets tests, and they can indeed change fortnight to fortnight. So if you're right on the cusp, you may not actually know until that very fortnight in terms of what your net assets are at that particular time, or indeed if you've earned any income for those previous in the previous weeks. Pensioners tend to be very good actually at updating their fortnightly income if they've got any, or updating on their assets. But they should have a pretty good idea already about what it's going to be, and certainly they'll find out very shortly from Centrelink itself.
Well, let's go to the latest ACOS poverty report. It says there are 700,000 Australian children living in poverty. Should you revisit your cuts, given there are that many children who are living in deep disadvantage in Australia?
Yeah, I haven't read the full report, but I've read the news stories in relation to it, and it certainly appears that most of those children that are referenced in the report are growing up in single-parent households, perhaps where nobody is working in that household. And so I think that the most important thing that we can actually do overall in terms of alleviating poverty is to create more jobs and encourage more people to take those jobs. That's the most important point. And indeed, we've got a pretty good record at job creation, and we're obviously going through a welfare reform process as well, which can try to provide some assistance to individuals who may be likely to be on long-term welfare. And that includes our Try, Test and Learn fund, a $96 million fund, which will be very targeted at those vulnerable groups.
But Minister, even CEDA has said, and ACOS has been quoting this today, that low welfare means that it's a barrier to work for some of these people. So actually these welfare payments themselves, the New Start payment, and there have been calls to increase it, even the BCA is behind it, big businesses behind this say that the welfare payments themselves are disabling people's ability to work. Isn't that something you need to look at too when you talk about a holistic approach?
Certainly, PK, the New Start payments alone is very difficult to live on if that's all you've got. Of course, if you've got children, which is what we're talking about here, you'd also receive probably a parenting payment, you'd also receive family tax benefits, you're most likely to go and get rent assistance as well. Just on New Start, which is what most of the public debate is about, only a very small proportion of Australians just live on the New Start payment alone, which I admit, if you're just living on that, it's pretty tough. But nearly all Australians on New Start also get some other benefits. I think from memory, about 75% of New Start recipients get at least 2 other benefits. Typically that will include rent assistance, might include some other supplements. So you've got to look at holistically the exact amount of money which people are getting. Now,
so are ACOS wrong then when they're saying that 700,000 children are living in poverty? Because these people are getting the whole suite that you're describing, and yet ACOS says they're living in poverty.
They are PK, but I'm also cautious about using that definition of poverty. Now, the definition which they're using for that report is anybody who has less than 50% of the median income in Australia. So it's, if you like, it's a sense of relative inequality rather than a measure of absolute poverty. Now, most people, when they hear that 700,000 people are living in, or children living in poverty, would assume that there's 700,000 children going hungry, going without clothes, going without shelter. I don't think that's the case, and indeed even the examples which are used in the newspaper articles don't give that indication. What that measure is simply saying that there's a degree of wealth inequality, and there are 700,000 children who live in a household which earns less than 50% of the median income, which I think is a very different
measure
measure to what we might ordinarily accept.
Do you accept that your budget cuts have contributed to that story, that have made that story worse for these families?
I do not, and our overall objective, Patricia, is to grow the economy and get people out of welfare into work, because at the end of the day, the best poverty antidote that there is getting people employed. And in fact, it is a poison on people if you are on long-term welfare dependence. We see this in pockets around the country, and we're absolutely determined to try to minimise that, both through growing the economy, creating more opportunities, but also
according to
CEDA,
your welfare payments. But according to CEDA, your welfare payments are making it impossible for them to get into these jobs anyway. So it's circular, it's dysfunctional, and it's causing heartache and miserable lives for so many children. Surely you need to revisit your entire approach rather than describe this, this utopian situation where all these single parents will be taking these jobs. It's just not happening.
Well, I disagree with that assessment which you've just made. If you look across at New Zealand, and we've modelled and are modelling a lot of our reforms what New Zealand has done, they have gone through this social investment approach and had an initial target on single parents. And indeed, they've had a lot of success in getting single parents off welfare and onto a better pathway. From memory, when I was speaking to the finance minister over there, I think they've now got 40% fewer single parents under the age of 22 than what they had 5 or 6 years ago when they embarked on this program. So it appears to be having success in New Zealand, which is using a highly targeted approach to assist single parents to get off welfare and into work where it is available. It is the best antidote to poverty. It is the best antidote to being poor, is taking that job. Whatever job is available, take that first one, get some skills under your belt and then go for the next one. And we've got to have the opportunities there.
Look,
we've also got to have the structure there as well.
Yeah, I don't think there's any dispute that it's the best way. It's about getting access to those jobs in the first place. Let's move on to another topic. I wonder what your parliamentary goals are this week. Do you think you'll get the ABCC through the lower house, the Registered Organisations Bill as well?
Well, the Registered Trade Organisations Bill will be introduced into the lower house, and we're quietly optimistic that it will go through the parliaments. Now, we just had the CFA bill, as you know, go through the parliaments last week, and that was a very significant bill in terms of protecting emergency service volunteers from union militancy. This bill is also critically important, the Registered Trade Organisations Bill and the ABCC bill, because yes, they deal with union unlawfulness and union corruption, but almost more importantly, it creates greater productivity, which means you actually get more infrastructure, you get cheaper buildings, and they're great for the entire community. And it gives greater surety to union members that if they're paying union dues, that their money is not going to be ripped off. That's what these bills are about, and we hope that all parliamentarians will support it.
Am I right to read between the lines, you've got One Nation on side now for the Registered Organisations Bill to secure its passage through the upper house? Is that what you're suggesting?
I'm just suggesting that we're optimistic about getting it through both the lower house and the upper house. I'm not going to foreshadow before they declare themselves which way they're going to vote, but One Nation did support the CFA bill, which did deal with union militancy as it applied to emergency services volunteers in Victoria.
Just on another big issue that's really dominated on Friday, it was wall-to-wall, the Attorney General's stoush with the chief law bureaucrat of the country, Who should quit? I mean, because the situation looks like the relationship is completely untenable. I've never seen anything like it.
To be honest, Patricia, I know it got wall-to-wall coverage on Sky and some other media outlets on Friday, but I was out in my electorate on Saturday morning and it didn't get raised once with me. I think it's very much an insider issue and doesn't directly affect everyday Australian citizens. They were still much more concerned about the congestion on the roads, the cost of living pressures, the scourge of ice and crime. The Attorney-General has made extensive comments in relation to this issue. The issue is also being addressed by one of the Senate committees, and I'll leave further comment to the Attorney-General in relation to it.
OK, on the ACT election, Labor, with I think the support of the Greens, has effectively won many years in opposition for your side of politics. But you held a press conference warning about a text message during that campaign. Are you prepared to say now that you think the campaign has been won by Labor on dodgy grounds, or do you concede that that election's been won fair and square? What I was saying on Friday was that my department had sent a warning to ACT Labor because they were misusing the Medicare brand, just as federal Labor was misusing the Medicare brand during the federal election and ran a very misleading, deceptive campaign. Now, I don't think ACT Labor's campaign was nearly as egregious as the federal Labor one, but nevertheless they were also spreading mistruths about Medicare. I'm disappointed, obviously, with the ACT election results. I would have loved to have seen the coalition get up, but unfortunately they didn't. And we're going to have to wait till the next election to see them come in. Do you concede that the Medicare mistruths, as you described them, didn't really have much of an impact on the election, given lots of other issues were more dominant? I just don't know. I haven't been close enough to the ACT election. While I spend a lot of time in Canberra, I'm not as engaged in ACT politics as I am in federal politics or my own state of Victoria. That's diplomatically answered. Just finally on Donald Trump, because he is really the only story of the moment, to be honest. We're talking about all these other things, but it's the biggest story in town. Your colleague Josh Frydenberg, who I know you're close to, has suggested that he's a dropkick. Do you think he's a dropkick too?
I have my own personal views about Donald Trump, about some of his policies, and certainly about some of the things which he has said, which I would not say, and I don't think that they were right for someone of his stature to say. In fact, not right for anybody to say. However, we have a strong alliance with the United States. The United States people will determine who they want to be their presidents, and regardless of who they elect, we will work very closely with them. Our alliance will still be strong, and they will always be our number one national security partner. So I think that's the most important element of all of this. The key alliance is going to be strong regardless.
This morning, though, Tanya Plibersek said this morning on Sky that she thinks he's a security risk. Do you agree?
I would not say what Tanya Plibersek said. As I said, I have my own views about his personal comments and about some of his policies, but at the end of the day, it's up to the American people who they want to choose, and I don't think it's helpful for a government minister in Australia to be providing comment about his policies.
OK, well, very diplomatically answered. Have a great parliamentary week. Thanks for coming on, Alan.
Thanks, PK.